Now we're going to go ahead and create the tagged item views. But before I do, I want to make sure that my playlists, each proxy admin has the tagged item inline as an inline, right? So inlines equaling to tagged item inline, basically just so I for sure have these tags showing up, like the TV show proxy. We definitely want to have that one as well. And the TV show already does. Great. Playlist item, proxy, also that one. Let's go ahead and put it at the end. Okay, cool. So now I have a number of places for my tags. So if I go back into my admin, I can see tagged items in here. So what I want to actually be looking for here is duplicates. So this item right here, it says action and it says tagged item object 5, right? So that should show me that it's the instance ID of 5. So if I go back into Ant-Man, I have action in here as well, and it says tag item object of 2. Now, all this is showing me is that the tags themselves, so looking in the model, each tag, each individual slug field for those tags, none of them are actually unique, or in other words, we can't consider them unique. So I can not consider them unique in the way I did with my categories, right? So categories themselves, we had the slug that made sure that each slug was unique. So we know all of these slugs are unique. Even though the title might be duplicated, the slug itself is definitely going to be unique. Tags are not like that. So you can think of this as, the tag itself as our slug, right? So define property, and we could come in here and just return self.tag. Okay. But again, it's going to be the exact same tag across many different models. So how do we actually go about solving this in our display? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a class tagged item manager, and it's going to be models.manager. And what we want to do here is define the actual list of them, or we'll call it a unique list. And I'm going to leave this in as a manager. I probably do not need a unique list as a query set filter. Perhaps I would in the future, but right now I do not. So this unique list, what is it that I'm trying to do here? Well, first of all, let's go ahead and get the query set. So self.get query set. This, of course, will give me all of the items in here. So what I want to do is I want to get the values list of those tags, and we'll go ahead and say flat being true, right? So this is actually a tags list, and we can do a set on this, and then that set will now make it unique. So let's just call this the tag set, and then the unique list will be finally the list of that tag set, right? So we can also sort this in here. So we'll go ahead and do sorted, and that will give us A to Z or A to Z, depending on where you're from. And it will give you that sorted list that will have each individual tag itself. Now, this is actually key for how we're going to render this out. We'll see what it looks like in a moment. And what I'll do here is say objects equal to that tagged item manager, so we can actually have access to this. So now in our views, let's go ahead and create a list view for this. So we'll go ahead and do from the Django.views.generic, import list view, and then from.models, we're going to import tagged item. And we'll go ahead and do class tag item list view, takes in a list view, and we'll give it a query set equaling to tagged item, and then .objects.unique list, and call that. Okay. So again, inside of tags, we'll go ahead and do urls.py, and from Django.urls, import path, and then URL patterns equals to a list. Then from .views, we're going to go and import our tagged item list view and path of an empty string here, tagged item list view as view. Cool. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's bring it into our main configuration for our URLs for this project. Okay, and then let's grab maybe the categories one and order it as best we can. Okay, so there we go. So let's make sure our server's still running. Sure enough, it is. So let's go ahead and look at tags. And it needs to require a query set. So let's go ahead and just double check how our tags are being rendered. And so it's actually not returning a query set, right? So that's actually not really that surprising. It's only returning the sorted tag list. So there's a couple of different ways on how I could think about doing this. I could just go off of the items that contain this, as in I could use a query set to filter down based off of these things. So tags list equaling to that. And then I could return self.get query set and tag in tags list. And this actually is valid for other things. In this case, it's not valid because it's giving us the exact same problem that we had before. So this is a list. We can't use the generic list view for something like this. You actually have to use a query set itself. So what we want to do instead then is we're going to import from views. We're just going to import a single view. And this is going to be almost identical, well, practically identical to a function-based view. So we're going to go ahead and call get, take in self and request. This is going to be now my tag list. And I'll give it into my context. So context being my, we can try and call it query set, but I, again, want to call this just tag list. You could call it object list is what I should have said, but there we go. And then now I'm going to go ahead and return render. Oops, I should have not removed render, but so from Django.shortcuts import render. So we're going to now return render of the request. The template name we want to use in this case is going to be tags, and then let's go ahead and say tag list.html, and then pass in our context here. Okay. So again, you could use this as a function-based view, but since I already implemented the class-based view, I'm going to leave it as that. But also, if I want to have other mix-ins and stuff like that, I prefer using class-based views. Okay, cool. So now that we've got this, let's go ahead and refresh in here. Template does not exist. That's exactly the error we wanted. So inside of my templates now, I'm going to make that folder for tags. And then inside of that, we'll go ahead and say taglist.html. I'm actually going to copy the category list and see if we can get away with it. Paste in here. And we'll go ahead and say tags. And this, of course, is no longer going to be categories, but rather just tags. And now it's not an object list, but rather the actual, we called it the tag list. So now it's just for tag and tag list. This will actually have to hard code the URL at this point. So I'll go ahead and say tags, and this is equal to that tag, right? So I'm actually iterating through the individual tag. It's not an instance. It's just a tag object. And I can use the pipe./title, and that should give me some of these other tags that I have. And notice that they are unique. Now, if I were to do this with a query set, if I did .all and then .values, just doing tag itself, getting rid of that unique list and refresh in there, it shows me that both item of tag is going to come in here. Oops, I should call this values list and flat being true. And then that way we would actually see action coming up duplicate times, right? And of course, if I did this 100 more times, it would definitely show up. It would have a lot of different problems for us. Okay. So this is also a time to really think about, in the long run, would this be the most performant way to do it, right? So in the long run, should I actually be creating all of these unique item lists and doing this kind of query set? And the answer is no. What you actually would be doing in the long run is you would create another model with a signal. So every time a tagged item is created, it would just create a sort of general tag model class. And then you would actually use the list view to generate those tags. So there'd be significantly less tags if this essentially just generated another model. That's not something I want to do. I just want to show you how to implement this side of things. Okay, cool. So now we want to think about the detail view. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and jump in to my categories again. And I'm going to go ahead and import well, I'll import everything just so I can be sure to have all of the imports I need. And I'll get rid of the list view and the category stuff. And I'll just go ahead and bring these things up. Okay, so I already have render in here, so get rid of that. Cool. And let's rearrange this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now our tagged detail view, so tagged item detail view, we still want the playlist, right? And this time I'm going to go ahead and do tag objects.get. Well, it's no longer get, right? So it's not that this isn't found. Instead, what it's going to be is, well, we could probably just filter it down. So the tagged object itself, we probably don't need to use the context of object. We can probably just use the tag itself. So realistically, I'm not even going to add this context in here. Based off of also what we did with the tag list itself, when we created that, we just went off of the values list, right? So it's literally just the value that's in the slug field. So what we don't need is much more data. We don't need the instances in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this context data altogether, with the one exception of just having the slug in here and the of the title. And I'll go ahead and use an F string so we can make it a title. There we go. So if I close that down, this is all I really want in here. Get rid of that. Okay. Next thing is going to be the actual, not category, but the actual tag. So if I go in here and say tags underscore tag, right, then hopefully I'll be able to see all the playlists that actually associate to this particular tag, which I've been calling, slug, and that's actually how we'll have it in our URL. Or maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should actually leave it in as tag, because it still will be a slug field, or a slug as it pertains to the URL, but the actual detail, perhaps we don't need that. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and add this into our URLs. And let's go ahead and actually make that path. So first off, we declare what it is, which is a slug, and we'll declare the actual variable name, which is tag, and then tagged item detail as view. Initialize that, save it. Okay, great. So now back into our templates, we do have the items actually, linked, and we got query set has no unique item. Yes, of course we don't. So this right here, this unique list should not be under .all, but rather just unique list. Okay, so there we go. And I hit action. OBJ is not defined. So I've got a problem in my views. That's not entirely unexpected, because we don't need that anymore. I'll just do that. There we go. And we refresh in here, and now it's showing me tags of action. It's showing those two different movies. If I do comedy, it's only showing me Ant-Man at this point. So that's because I didn't actually create that many tagged items. Let's go into my TV shows and tag these items as well. So comedy, and then maybe sitcom, and so on. So let's just verify that this actually works. And comedy is not showing me anything related to those things. So let's actually lowercase these. This might be another thing I need to do in my receiver function. Let's go ahead and save and continue. And there we go. Yep. So I have one more thing that I want to add into the tag model itself. And that's by creating a signal to make sure that the tag, before it's actually saved, that it is lowercased. So from django.db.models, we're going to import the pre-save, and I'm going to define lowercase tag pre-save, and this is going to be sender instance, and let's say args and keyword args, and then instance.tag equals to the string of instance.tag, and then .lower, and then pre-save .connect. Let's say lowercase, yeah, we'll just leave it as tag, and then sender equals to the tagged item. Okay. So hopefully this will actually lowercase all of my tags when I create them. So let's try that out. And I think Paul Rudd is in the office sometime. No, it's definitely not. Let's go ahead and go back into our pre-save. This should be .signals. And I know where Paul Rudd actually is. If we go into our TV shows, Parks and Rec, Paul Rudd shows up everywhere. And Paul Rudd, let's go ahead and do tab there. Save and continue. It lowercased it for us. Great. Back into our tags. I now have Paul Rudd here. And now it's showing me the correct tags with the various items. Pretty cool. Okay, so now we have our actual tags going, our categories going, and we have a really just a nice way to be able to sort through a lot of this data. So, one of the things that you might be concerned about potentially is the tagged item, whether or not it's active, like if it should be an active item, as in a field being inside of the tagged item. If you actually did something for active, that is something that you could consider adding in here and then just adding that complexity to each one of the views, right? So you could actually do the lookup on the tag on whether or not it's active. So one of the ways to think about this too is to say something like tags tag and active being true. This of course doesn't necessarily, or rather not tag, but tags active being true. This would actually filter down based off of that. But of course, I don't want to add too much complexity on how I do these kinds of lookups. Because realistically, if the tag is no longer active, you should probably just delete it in this case, not have a field on whether or not it's active. Quite a bit different than the category being active, because the category being active, well, a lot of different playlists could potentially reference this category as their default category, whereas the tags themselves, each playlist has only one tag instance, right? So this tag instance has to be, it's like not unique across, is kind of the point, right? So in other words, let's actually take a look at this. If I no longer wanted Paul Rudd as a tag for this TV show or in general, if I didn't want it in general, I'd have to go into the Python shell and actually delete all of them, or potentially go into the tagged items here, look for the one that is Paul Rudd or the few of them that are, and delete it. That's quite a bit different than the categories. I only have 3 categories here, even though multiple playlists fit under these categories. And that's the difference between using generic foreign keys and actual foreign keys. That's another difference, is the actual foreign key, there's only going to be one across multiple things, where the generic foreign key, there's going to be multiple across multiple things, and thus creating the need to even make this model manager for a unique list. All right, so we covered quite a bit in this one as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the search view now.